Hi, everyone, and welcome back to today's AlphaNooner. We are very excited to be joined on a Wednesday by Todd Harrison. He's back, fresh shave. We were just talking about it before. Please vote in the comments. Are you
Fresh
pro summer?
shaved, and all of a sudden, for the first time in 6 weeks, our sector's green. So
It's going to be, causation is possible. And that'll be a lot of razors you'll have to buy, a lot of shaving cream if that's the
appreciate it.
trend. You could keep it up for the rest of the week. I guess you'd have to just to see how things end.
Well,
We'll see.
can't undo it now, but yeah. How
That's
are
true.
you, Mac?
I'm doing great. I feel like still getting back in the mix from 4th of July. I feel like that midweek-ish Thursday holiday really throws the week before and a little bit after, but I feel like finally getting back in the mix of everything, which is great. Had a great 4th of July, got to go to the beach and enjoy. Seems like you had a great 4th of July. I was reading your Substack, and I feel like you did a great job catching everyone up on what you've been
My
up
free
to.
Substack.
That is true. That is true. Yes. Sign up where you like. I know. It's true. A whole new look. Although El Guapo, you've been experimenting with
Yeah,
facial hair as well.
he's a smart money. I'm just following the smart money. That's
There you
all.
go.
I didn't
Fair
even
enough.
know that, but that's true. I subconsciously was trying to emulate guap.
That's possible. I buy it. He's got some style. All right. Well then, so 4th of July was good. How was it for anyone who is not for some reason on the free Substack? Which it should be.
No, it was fine. We went out. We were out east. Went to a 4th of July party at my friend's house in Southampton, where I didn't hear when they said we're starting the fireworks, and it was a huge, massive fireworks show that literally launched from about 10 feet from where I was at first. Which scared the living Christ out of me, but other than that, it was great. It's interesting to run into people and like, what do you do? I'm like, oh, and as soon as they hear cannabis, they're like, oh God, if I can make back half the money I lost in cannabis, I'd be thrilled. And that's like pretty much everywhere. That's the feedback. But
I
anyway,
will say, I think that's true on an investment side of things. I weirdly did have you ever heard of like a supper club?
yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
So I went to one recently, and it's a random mix of strangers, people you didn't know, and a mix of ages in general. Was talking to people about the industry. Just kind of comes up when people are asking what you do for work. And while no one had invested in cannabis yet, or really thought about it that way, one of the people, the oldest person there, super sweet and super nice, had recently gotten him and his wife into drinking the THC beverages. So I think it's out there. The demand is building. The awareness is building. I know it has been definitely painful few years. Things seem like they are positioning up in a good way, but we'll talk about what sort of the uncertainties are as well, because I know those still definitely
Yeah,
exist.
I was kind of futzing around this morning.
Yeah.
I was talking, to some players in the space, and I just, sort of just to kind of top of my head listed like, the wall of worry going into the back half of the year. And like, I listed 10 reasons, 10 concerns, like pretty quickly. And I was like, okay, like most of these are sort of known. And you look at volume. I think I just got off the phone with Sammy. He was telling me that $2 million traded on the underlyings today. To this point, less than 2 million at the time. I'm assuming 2 million now. I'm rounding up, which is crazy, right? It's just crazy. So yeah, it's what we're sort of in. We're waiting as we have, but there's only 12 days left of the comment period, which is good, right? Because if anything, it gets us to the next phase, which is really that's the the ALJ and what they have to say, and what that's going to be really the tell in terms of the timing. But as of now, July 10th, 12:04 p.m., we're on track for Schedule 3 to pass before the election, or finalize, I should say, before the election. And there's, that's reason for optimism. If you look at the setup and you look at the sentiment and you look at, the performance and, lipstick on a pig, yes. The price action has been terrible, as we all know, since April 30th. Every level has been met, and the volume's just been, absolutely horrendous. So, that's what we have here. But as we go into the back half of the year, again, 12 days out from the comment period ending, presumably the ALJ, now we're sort of getting back into, the zone where we could see a Garland memo, right? We've heard from a lot of people that there's confusion because Schedule 3, you need a prescription. But if you actually read the DEA document, as I did not, but my partner did,
Mm-hmm.
And it says it right in there in the document, and I'll just read it because he took the time to read it. In addition, marijuana would remain subject to applicable provisions of the FDCA. For example, under the FDCA, a drug containing a substance with the CSA's definition of marijuana would need FDA approval to be lawfully introduced or delivered for introduction into interstate commerce, not intrastate commerce, right? That's saying if you need a prescription for interstate commerce. So, if insofar that that's a concern, that you're going to need a prescription for cannabis, I don't think that that's going to necessarily pan out. But there are certainly other concerns, and I know you and I talked about kind of chewing through those as the hour wears on.
Yeah, we can talk into that. So I feel like for the Schedule 3 component of it, I know there's still a lot of unknowns, kind of like what you're saying, but again, there's some clarity if you actually read through the documents, which is important. But how much of right now do you feel like investors are thinking Schedule 3 and viewing Schedule 3 kind of on its own, the impacts there, tax, all that stuff, versus Schedule 3 plus what we think could come next? What's your
I don't think investors are thinking about cannabis right now, to be honest.
Okay.
There's a lot of shiny objects out there at all-time highs that are very liquid, right? So, investors tend to look at things that are like they did in the first quarter when you're the top performing ETF and there's volume. They're like, hey, let's see what's going on over here. And that's what happened in the first quarter. Second quarter, it went from first to worst, I guess. And maybe we played leapfrog here in the third quarter. I don't know. We're going to need to see some headlines. And that's the thing, right? Because here we are, sitting under all sorts of resistance levels and not showing really any motivation, right? It's sort of like Biden, right? It's like, just there's been there's no oomph to this. Yeah. No motivation. There's no zest. There's no reason to get excited. And you need that, right? So the buyers are higher. What it is I said earlier, it said it's, I'm losing my mind. Suffice to say that that there's that there's been no price action that's been very encouraging, and here we are sort of turning under the March lows, which at 730, if you it reminds me of when we kind of sat under the 200-day for a couple of weeks before we legged down, right? Because you can't argue with the chart and the narrative's chasing the price lower. You can't argue with the chart very long, but again. Look at the volumes here. The ETF, which is the liquidity bastion for U.S. cannabis, is traded under $18 million, and it's 1208. So, I don't think people are looking at the sector, right? Why would you, right? When there's so much in it, so many uncertainties, right? And you could spin that two ways, right? Is this a wall of worry that we're going to climb? Because everybody that I've talked to is like, okay, you're going to get your catalysts. And that's another opportunity to sell, and that seems to be the mindset. Like, okay, like there's green, there's a bid, I'm going to move on. And that seems to be the mindset. And that's, I've been doing this 34, 35 years now. Like that's the mindset, at this part of the cycle, right? Like get me out. Just like the mindset in, at the end of 2020 and 2021 is only if these things could pull back 10, 15, 20%, I would love to buy them. Now they're down 90%. Everyone's like, I don't want to fucking touch them. Right. So, not all companies are created equal, but, we do look at Green Thumb and say, okay, if they are, best in breed and this is where it's trading, like where should everybody else be trading off of that? But I don't think that the investors are doing the work right now because there's a lot of uncertainty. There's no liquidity. And it's very complicated until, for even people who are in the industry, there's a lot of uncertainty. So for the outsiders looking in, you're like, what's it all about?
I think that's true, but I do think it has been a case of our worst worries have not been realized in that way. It seems like things are plodding along forward. It does seem like there have been some things that have come up where we don't know the impacts or trying to figure that out, like the Chevron. I think repealing has been kind of part of that mix. So I think we will continue to see just sort of like what happens next if we get to the other side of rescheduling and we do get Schedule 3. When do we get to start seeing listing and all of that stuff kind of come through? So I think there is a feeling of uncertainty, but it does feel like the actual things that are happening is sort of a march of progress. So I think that's also important to kind of remember in some ways.
Yeah, and I don't think Schedule 3 is priced in. I mean, people have said, well, if this is the catalyst we've been waiting for, and they're going down on this, then what are we waiting for, right? But what we found out 2 weeks after that initial, spike in fade, I guess, on April 30th, was that the DEA wasn't on board. So then it was like, okay, well, if the DEA is on board, then this is going to drag everything out. It's not the DEA, factions within the DEA, whatever the case may be. But I mean, I'm not a lawyer, much less, by proxy or osmosis. But like Shane Pennington, he's been studying this. Matt Zorn's been studying this for better part of 10 years, right? Like they both think that this is okay. So does Denton's, which is a pretty reputable, law firm in the space. So like the people who I really respect seem to think that this is not going to be impacted by the Chevron deference. But I'm really curious to see how the Chevron deference impacts the David Boies lawsuit, right? Because if these 3-letter agencies are now suspect, what does that do to a tax lawsuit?
Yes,
Taxes.
We'll have to see. I do think the one thing that is encouraging is that I know the sort of cannabis issue is being attacked on all of those different fronts. So I think even if there is a little bit of stalling or sort of a little bit of complication on one of the sides, I think it's still overall marching forward. It seems to be, at least so far at this point, like you're saying, on July 10th.
And you could argue the Dems need it. I mean,
they do. They really do. What do you think's going on there? I don't know. I know we could probably spend an hour or two talking about what's going on the political side.
I think he's going to step aside. I don't think he has a choice, really? But I don't think that. My understanding, again, not a political operative, but there's a $260 million fund that was raised on this ticket. So if they're going to, move outside of the ticket, meaning if Kamala is not going to be
president,
I'm sorry, I was reading a headline. Yeah. If Kamala's not going to be on the ticket, then they've got to start over and give back, or that $260 million, and it's a lot of money. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think he's with it. I don't think I'm alone in saying that. It's pretty fucking scary. But it is what it is. But I think that sort of plays into, we talked about the wall of worry earlier. We had 10 reasons. Like the number one was timing and viability of Schedule 3. The second one was the intoxicating hemp loophole. And it's interesting, right? Like I was just talking about this also on the last call. It's like, it's an interesting case study because you had the legal cannabis market that was taxed, regulated, and just scrutinized from the get-go to make sure it was like completely safe and compliant, et cetera, et cetera. And then you had this other industry, the hemp industry, which slipped through a loophole, evolved into a $40 billion industry. And I guess they're going to apply the rules and regulations, or try to apply the rules and regulations after the fact. Yeah, right. But then you have the states, right? I was telling Matt Darren, like I was trying to order the Curaleaf beverage, and I couldn't get it in New York. And he's like, oh, you can't do it in New York. I'm like, okay. It's patchwork in the states but I guess my concern there, and again, I think that common sense, unless we're just following the money, because I think we talked about this last time, like MSOs were passing the hat in Florida, and they got flanked by the alcohol and hemp lobby in DC. And after 5 years of onerous taxation and regulatory delays, legislative delays, like this industry is not equipped for a two-front war, right? We're depleted, right? So how do you compete? And it, when it's money that's making the DC world go around. That being said, I do think that the hemp loophole will modify. I think hemp beverages, that is already out of that. Those horses are out of the gate.
On a federal level or on a state level still? You think fully on a federal level, they'll fully close the loophole?
I don't think they'll fully close it. I think the best case is that they will modify it to allow for hemp beverages, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
But I just don't see how they don't address it. I guess,
doing what they're doing now
in DC.
Yeah.
But if they leave it to the states to regulate, then that's where that's going to go. But certainly, I think that's an uncertainty. Another uncertainty that is cause for pause is investors looking at the space.
That's fair. Ultimately, do you think sort of the hemp side of things, opportunity, risk? What are you feeling in terms of how it affects MSOs or SSOs?
Well, I think it's both. Most MSOs, I don't think, are going to pivot per se, nor do I think, I don't know, I guess, it does take share, right? It's hard to argue that it's not impacting. We used to talk a lot about the gray market, right? The illicit market, and you don't really hear about that as much anymore. It's really the conversations about the hemp.
Yeah.
I think it's, I think that, one way or another, the goal here is to arrive at a uniform regulatory construct for cannabinoids, right? It doesn't make sense to have, it's the same plant. So to have two sets of regulations for the same plant is, I guess, the definition of.
And two bad structures, two ones that are not fully working, that are not really well thought out.
If you combine them,
yeah,
I think you have something there. But I don't listen. It's going to be what it's going to be. Like we're heading into earnings. I don't think earnings are going to be all that great, but it's it's where we are right now, right? Like it's just it's sort of we're in the wait zone on a lot of on some clarity on a lot of these issues.
Yep. But again, we're moving closer and closer and closer to actually having some answers, which is great. I think that is a nice deadline to have. So hopefully we'll get to the side of that and feel. I don't know, because I know it is such a sentiment game right now.
And let's say third one, GOP post-election opposition. Right? I think this is probably the biggest, right? Because whether it's like how does a red Congress, if that's where we land, how does that modify the hemp conversation, or Donald Trump, if that's where we land, how does that modify the cannabis conversation? Let me just say that I don't think that a second Trump administration will be as onerous as a first Trump administration. Okay. I've written on this, Make America Green Again. Like if I'm Donald Trump and I'm looking at the polls and the 91%, and I'm looking at states' rights and how states' rights was my abortion sort of safe place, right? Same conversation. So if he's for states' rights and if he's for scheduling, Schedule 3,
that's good.
I think that's going to be a bullish sort of evolution in psychology. The timing and let's just say we'll see it when it happens. I don't necessarily think he has to come out like all
pro. I love cannabis. I'm a pot guy. Yeah,
it should be a states issue, and then if you could throw something in there and says yes, it's a states issue, but American companies should be traded, should list on American exchanges and have access to the U.S. banking system, and he would own the issue forever. Like he would steal the issue. Right? Yeah. Because all anybody would remember is Donald Trump, advocating for what's inevitable, and at a time where Joe Biden can't put two words together.
That's true.
It's a political opportunity. Whether it manifests, I guess, remains to be seen. But I don't think it's as unfounded as, I guess, conventional wisdom. And it's hard to argue with conventional wisdom. Like I think of Trump, I think of Jeff Sessions, right? But other people think of Trump and they think of, and I'm talking about Weldon, they think of the president that pardoned him.
Very true.
Right? So little known fact that Donald Trump has commuted more cannabis sentences than Joe Biden.
There you go.
And, does he drop that at a point just to kind of demonstrate how frail and feeble the Democratic leadership has been?
I think he would love to take a nice dunk. I think that's an easy dunk for him to be able to take, I guess, during debates if they continue on, and we'll see. How much thought are you putting into the ticket as a whole? So I know he hasn't announced VP yet. How much does that take into account, how things might change? Because I do agree. He seems to me neutral, if not pro states, but pro.
Well, it's the, you look at, again, we've talked about this for the last 6 months, Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio.
Yes.
Right. If you win Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, you're going to be the president. Sure. All three are in the process of literally turning green before our eyes. Different phases, right? Ohio, Florida, Pennsylvania, but those are important states. And it's like Ohio, wasn't really that close. Ohio beat abortion. In Ohio, cannabis output, I think 74% to 73%, something like that, by 1%, or 73 to 72, whatever it was. It's interesting, and I think it raised a lot of eyebrows. Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons I think that's that this becomes a political football into the fall.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Timing of that is unknown. So let's see. Fourth, this is also probably right there. Custody listing, liquidity.
Yep, I know. Everyone's waiting.
It is what it is. I don't know what I could add to that. But hopefully we'll see something there. I saw Don Murphy had posted that He thinks Schedule 3 and safe banking are on the tape by by the inauguration. But we'll see. I don't think anybody who's had a prediction about anything has been right ever, and myself included. So we'll see what happens there. But we need something there. Federal guidance was the fifth one. Again, this goes back to what we discussed earlier. Are you going to need a prescription? How's it all going to fit together? What's okay? What's not okay? It's not a law per se, but certainly a memo from the Attorney General offering guidance is additive on the margin. For clarity. Clarity is good. Uncertainty bad.
Yeah, I think that tracks. I will say also for Don's, he did recently have a birthday earlier this week. So if he made a birthday wish, blew out the candles, you never know. He might be right. We'll see. It's possible. Let me really quickly go through some of these comments because I'm seeing them fly by, which are great. Also, maybe true. I know it's a wall of worry in a lot of ways, but it's still fair. September. That is true.
Yeah, it might be. It's really only 5 people in the. I can't tell.
Well, no. I think we've got like 90-ish. But if you're on YouTube, feel free to jump in as well. You're very welcome.
Well, I apologize. Okay, so
you're good.
I'm reading headlines and watching things as we talk here.
What's coming out? What's fresh hot off the press?
It's nothing. It's ball bearings.
A lot of noise.
It's super quiet. My wife is out east, and I'm like, no, I got to go home. I work this week. So,
you could have taken it. You could have taken it from the road. Didn't we do an AlphaNooner once? Where were you? You were in DC, I think, but you were by Union Station.
I was thinking about that, but I like I have things to do here anyway, and I don't mind a little space.
That's good. I appreciate it. Also, hey Jane, I haven't heard from you in a long time. I'm glad that you're hopefully doing okay, and Winston back on track. All of that. Loving the pictures.
So what? Okay, so we were going through the list.
That's true.
Federal guidance, the Garland memo. I think that that's going to help shine a light. And then we get into things like pricing pressure, normalization over time. You look and then sales trends in mature states, right? And then I guess we could add in there the state siloed supply chains. I'll take them one at a time, but pricing pressure. I don't think anybody who's ever followed this industry is not aware that over time this becomes the price normalizes and volumes increase and the space consolidates, right? That's sort of the map. And people will take share, companies will take share, and there'll be winners that emerge from this, and that's the map. And it becomes not, you say, okay, well, how many more states are there? Is there to turn on? That's where the growth is coming from, right? And what happens after Florida and Pennsylvania? What happens if we all turn into Colorado and California? And that's part of the problem right now. It's you can't look at point to a cannabis success story. I mean, there's some stocks that have been up over time, but it's hard. Like you look at Canada and you're like, okay, show me a success story in Canada. You look at sort of the last 5 years and what the market's doing at all-time highs here, and we're sort of grinding our teeth trying to get back through the March lows, which we're not yet. So, it's like, okay, like at what point do you say, that this sector is out of flavor, this sector is obviously broken, et cetera, et cetera. I think, listen, over time, you need to have a free and open marketplace for stocks, obviously. I think all of this sort of ties together in terms of how that solution forms, right? Including the consolidation, including, the more breadth versus depth, right? In states like getting, the consumer eyes, right? Getting your brands in the marketplace. I think Andrew Toot at Forefront said, for the first time that he can really remember, brands are starting to matter. And I think therein lies the opportunity. The state siloed, supply chains and saying, okay, well, that's not a viable model over time. Listen, I don't think interstate commerce is the death knell. I think it's, part of an evolution towards a normalized market. And there's going to be a market for, indoor high quality cannabis, right? I think ever more. Does it shift the balance of powers? Of course. Does it, take margin at the margin? Probably. But that remains to be seen. If what we're hearing about the Garland and everything else that seems to be in play, like interstate's not part of that equation. Could you see state to state interstate pacts? Of course you can. Right. Like I have a hard time seeing the government coming in and arresting people for that. But, those things take time. So it's a risk, but I don't think it's an existential risk. Is sort of what it lands at.
I think that's fair. Really quickly, Jane has a great question, which I feel like is something that we haven't talked about in the past, which is interesting. I think we've constantly had the conversation around what are we getting? When are we getting it? How do we move things along? She's got a question of what happens if we get everything we want, everything we think we should be getting, and everything that we think is potentially coming. But what if we get all of it and nobody cares?
Well, if we get all of that, then the math is going to make it so that people are going to have to care, right? I mean, because you think about the free cash flow, you think about the growth, I mean, you just look at, at the industry going forward and saying, okay, that you have these companies that can now, the bifurcation that's been created over the last, however many years now, you're going to see consolidation, you're going to see, the math is going to drive this, right? And that's what we've said since the beginning. I think it was ATB that said, right, I think it's trading at 8 times, the space trading 8 times versus a base case of 12 times. And that base case of 12 times does not include Florida or Schedule 3. So, that's the math. But, in a show me world, like we're not pricing that in. I would be genuinely surprised if we get through the summer and we're, unless we get bad news, and we could, but going through the sort of the list of catalysts and Florida, the way that's polling recently,
Yes.
and whether we get Pennsylvania at the end of this year, beginning of next year, that seems to be ready to tip with Ohio, turning on any day now. So there's going to be growth next year, right? Which is good. So to Jane's question, in addition to all those things, like, if we start to see, growth in some of these new markets and, even New York, which I think is a mammoth market that everyone sort of has written off.
Yes.
It's going to be a big driver for the New York license holders. But again, after 5 years and given the liquidity and given the price performance of everything around us, I don't think anybody really cares, right? So like, when will they care? They'll care when they see the ETF or the performance and they start to chase it. That's the way the world works in Wall Street.
I think it is funny. It does tend to be like the psychology of people in general to kind of go after the thing as it's rising or after it's sort of risen a big chunk, even though it's,
Well, that
hardly
was the meme, right? The buy, goodbye, goodbye, buy,
Yeah.
buy. This is, this thing's going to excel, sell, 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 sell. I mean, it's been going on for years. I did not expect it would last this long or take this long or cut this deep, but the industry's come a long way. This is a big year, the end of the year. We're less than 4 months from the election, where we're going to find out 5 states, right? It's not just Florida, right? We have other 5 states with cannabis initiatives. Please don't ask me to list them. Let's see: North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Florida, and there's one more.
Oh,
I listed it yesterday. I should know this.
is it South?
Arkansas.
Arkansas? Okay, what's
Arkansas.
Arkansas?
Illinois. So yeah. So the only one we left, I think, we got to talk about growth, Florida, Pennsylvania, then the macro, right? Like, what the fuck? This is not going to happen. Trees don't grow to the sky, whether they're made by NVIDIA or anybody else. So how does cannabis sort of, unless that becomes one of those things, like we don't want to own these things because they're too expensive, and now we have some regulatory unlocks and some new states and some growth coming, and the narrative can flip. But I think what really it becomes is a game of NOMO versus FOMO, right? Like, NOMO under resistance and no volume, and like, I don't want this NOMO. Right? Leave this. I don't want this NOMO. And then you get news, and all of a sudden it's green, and you're back over support and through resistance, and it's like, what's going on over there, right? And that's just the way of this world. The question becomes like, if the market. This is my market section over here, but the market's just like sort of in a world of its own right. And we're not invited.
Not yet. I do think if some of the tech loses its shine a little bit, and that does lose some money that is kind of looking for a new growth story, that could potentially be cannabis. Who knows? We'll see. I think that could be positive. But yeah, all right, I'm seeing some questions come in, which are great. Yes. All right. Here was an interesting question. I think Guap brought this up last time, but you're in New York, so you might have a better answer for it. He was saying the last time he was in New York, he was able to buy cannabis with a credit card, not a debit card, because I think we talked about that last time.
And
How would that be
is that
possible?
illegal or is that a hemp derived? Because if it's at a bodega, like yeah, like they don't care. You know, if it's hemp derived, credit cards are fine, I would think.
Yeah.
Which is sort of the hypocrisy of these kind of dueling mandates here. But I do think, oh, it's legal. Yeah, that's news to me.
Okay.
So
There you go.
I don't, but I haven't been other than to Verilife, which is PharmaCann's. I haven't been to New York dispensary. I go to Jersey for my cannabis still,
There
but
you
then I
go.
have to consume it in Jersey, of course, because I won't bring it back.
Do not cross state lines. That is true.
That would be against the law.
That would be against the law. All right, let's see. Brian. I think that's true. It has been tough, but also thanks. It's very kind. All right,
Yeah,
let's see.
same. She has a fan club.
There you go. I'm in your fan club. Okay, let's see. From Matthew, great question. Even if we get 5 states and Schedule 3, if SAFER does not come through, are we still where we are now? I know we're close on time.
Good question. It's all about custody and the ability to own. So I think we're, I've heard a few, where I've netted out on this is like, tell me what the Garland memo says, because, we're told that it's going to have a particular language for financial institutions and banks that are working within the confines of state legal companies. I don't know if that's going to be enough with Schedule 3, to have Schedule 3 and the Garland memo, but it is not a law, any law against cannabis being listed. It is a policy, a compliance policy. The other thing that's interesting here is how Chevron deference could potentially apply to listing on the exchanges. SEC is a 3-letter acronym. Any 3-letter acronym, whether it's the FDA, the SEC, the IRS, right? They're all subject to further, I guess, deeper interpretation. David Boyd is a pretty smart guy, right? Hard to believe that this is not going to be something that's going to benefit. And I don't know. As you said, be positive. We'll leave with a positive note. David Boyd is having the ability to claw back all of the 280E taxes for U.S. cannabis that's been paid through the years. Probably bigger than the market cap of the industry right now. Or, I mean, maybe not. That's a stretch. But it's billions. It's a lot of money. So, we'll see what happens there. But I was talking to people on that team this morning, and I asked that question. And they're like, yeah, definitely. So that was good to hear. That's not going to happen probably for another year or two, presumably. But
still an extra little piece of encouragement. That's fair enough and fine. All right. Sorry, I'm seeing some final questions coming through. I know we're longer than we normally are, so I appreciate you hanging on. One, Sam Lawrence, I empathize with you. I am so sorry. I know that is tough. It has been hard if you've been in the cannabis space for a long time. So I do want to send thoughts there. Let's see. Question from Ogwap. Don't you think that there's going to be some larger interest move in when it's how much it clears up, I guess, is what, when's the point?
Well, that was my point of view, is as we edge through the summer, be incremental comfort with each particular additional catalyst. But I mean, I didn't foresee, the space giving back the whole year, right? Like I actually thought it would build on it as opposed to like there'd be all this uncertainty, like let's just wait and see. So that's what I would have thought. That's what I did think, Guap, and I was wrong, or at least early. But yeah, I do think, a Garland memo will help. I do think, getting through the comment period, and if the ALJ continues to kind of keep this on course, and then you can start to build once you start to get first downs. We need first downs, right? Yes. We can't score touchdowns until we get first downs.
I agree. Also, hey, 2Js, final question to wrap things up. What's it going to take for Stripe to finally work with you and finally just let the cannabis stuff go? What's the catalyst there?
I don't know, but I can tell you that I completely changed my perspective on, for those that don't know, I got a notice. I read a Cannabis Confidential Substack, and I got a notice that that they wouldn't process payments anymore because of it was the blog was deemed to be a cannabis related business, and I was like perturbed by that because it was like right over the holidays and like they cut it off on the 4th of July, and I was like, you know what? Fine, I'm gonna take July. I'm not even going to check and see if you've now allowed this to turn back on. I'm going to turn off subs for this month.
Wow.
And I'm going to try to spend a little bit more time with my family and not kill myself every day. And then revisit it when we start to see things that are moving forward.
What a healthy mindset. I'm sure hopefully some of it was helped by cannabis celebration as well on 4th of July. But that's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah. And it's fun, except for, everybody I know, family, friends, they're like, oh, you're the cannabis guy. Like, can I have some cannabis? I'm like, like it's cheap, but it's not free.
Yes, there you go. At least not the second one. That's also very funny. El Guapo changing it to hemp confidential would be.
By the way, here's a tip for the few people who are still here. I always carry a joints with me wherever I go.
Sure.
And when we go into a restaurant, particularly, without fail, like especially if it's crowded, I'll hand the people give like 20s, whatever it is. I'll hand the host a joint, and it's never failed. I got you right away, sir.
All right.
A little
bribery.
A little bribery. A little bartering.
A little sweet talk. Okay, that's fair. I like that. That's good stuff. Also, no, Fred, I don't think either of us have, and you're right. I don't know. It could be money. I don't know. All right. Well, such a fun check-in. I know, again, it's hard sometimes to talk about some of the uncertainties and what's there, but I think it's important, and it's good to kind of talk through because we're all kind of in that same bucket right now. Does seem like things are moving forward, but very excited to talk with you. I guess next time you're on, it's on the other side of the comment period.
2 weeks.
That's exciting. All right. Well, we'll have a lot to talk about then, I think, ultimately. All right. Thanks, everyone, for being on. Love the comments, love the questions. Glad that you guys are doing well. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks so much.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.